everyone. This is Rosalind Sedacca, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and I am the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network. I am the host of Divorce Dating and Empowered Living, and every week we interview and meet wonderful people who are dynamic professionals connected to divorcing and parenting issues. And we talk about things that I know are top of mind for you, crucial issues that are very important so that you can be a better parent and you could go through your divorce and co-parenting and post-divorce life in the best possible way. And I'm very excited today to introduce you to my guest. This is Dr. Unnatti Jain, and she Ph.D., and she is a certified youth behavior change expert, and she studies behavioral patterns. She believes that to build strong young adults, parents must shift from control to connection, and I love that. She's a strong proponent of self-exploration in nurturing connection, and through her talks and workshops, she enables people to identify the various components of control that hinder the child's growth mindset and limit their potential. So this is going to be a very valuable conversation we're having. And welcome, Dr. Jain. I'm so glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Rosalind. It's been a pleasure, absolutely a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me.
So let's start by asking you this question. Why do parents say that they don't want to divorce when they feel like they want to or should, but they're afraid to do it because of the children? And I know that's very, very common.
You know, that's the first question I asked my therapist when I was going through one, and I made the same excuse. And the answer that he gave me was, that's your fear. Your child will always have a father and a mother, whether you're divorced or you're together. So it's really a parent's fear of stepping into the unknown and being alone and parenting alone, rather than the child being the driving factor. So I think that has always resonated with me, and I've kind of held on to that, that your child will always have a father or a mother.
Yes. And I had the same fear and anxiety about I put off my divorce for years longer than I should have because I was afraid of scarring my child. And it turned out to be the best decision I could have made. And my son actually thanked me for doing it because he was not happy living in a home filled with tension and strife. And so it ultimately worked out the best. Let's talk about how children are impacted by tension and stress and conflict at home.
I think it raises completely confused individuals because they want both the parents together, but at the same time, they don't want them together. So it's a conflict that's going on in their heads. They can't side with one person while going with the other. They don't know who's right and who's wrong, but at the same time, they're trying to maintain peace. So they grow up as completely confused. That's one. The impact that it has on them vis-a-vis relationships is really deep because they start feeling like this is normal in relationships. This is how relationships are supposed to function. And they think abuse is a part of relationships.
Yeah.
So it's a very deep impact on their psyche.
It's so sad.
It's very sad, and they grow up with a lot of anger issues. They don't know how to express their emotions, and because their foundation is so weak. Imagine your parents are fighting at home, who are your security blanket, and they're the ones who make you feel secure in the world. And all of a sudden, both of them are fighting, and you don't know who's right and who's wrong, and your foundation is shaking. And you're like, I don't know where to go. So the child's anxiety, fear, self-esteem, it all plummets. And they grow up completely confused, and they don't believe in relationships, and they develop anger issues. So it's a whole plethora of things that happens to a child when they're going through divorce.
Yes. And this is so serious. And the good news is a lot of it is avoidable. if parents change the way they approach the divorce, that doesn't have to happen, what you were just saying and talking about. So what can parents do to choose better options to get better results and a happier life for the children they supposedly love?
So I think one thing is a given. It's very easy for us to sit here and say today that parents should take different measures. And while I do agree absolutely that parents should take different measures, at the point that the divorce is happening, it's extremely hard for an individual to think beyond what they're going through. Mm-hmm. So they absolutely need an outside force, and an outside force that's completely unbiased. So therapy is absolutely a must for every child who's going through, parents who are going through a divorce. So make sure your child is in therapy. That's one. You should go to therapy. I think every parent should go to therapy, because sometimes what happens is, and we don't do it very consciously, but I've had a lot of parents a lot of children who come to me and said, I'm very tired of being my parents' therapist. Yes. Because by default, because you're not talking to a therapist, yeah, you are so full of anger and hatred and disagreements that the only person who's going to hear you out with no opinion is either a therapist or your child. So you take it out on your child. And your child at that point in time gets even more confused, does not know whether to listen to you or to listen to the other parent. So get a therapist and make sure that your child and you both go to therapy. Avoid conflicts in front of your children. I think that's becoming self-aware that it's anyways having a very deep impact on the child's psyche when you're going through a divorce. On top of that, when there are arguments in front of them, it's even hard for them to digest that. And they're already dealing with their own body issues and anxiety issues and all of the other behavioral problems that they're having. On top of that, when they have two parents who are constantly bickering, it has a very deep impact on them. So try staying away from having the conflicts in front of them. Avoid complaining about each other to them. Right? And these are some very common things which we do we don't mean to do them, but they happen to us. And we express each other's negative points in front of the child, which biases the child's opinion. And really, at this point, the child does not, they care, they want the parents to be together, but they're more worried about their own happiness and their own foundation and their own security. So they'll hear you both out, but they will always have something to say about both their parents. So avoid talking to your child negatively about the other parent because you're impacting them. These are a couple of things that we can do and become self-aware as we go through the journey. It's very hard, and I totally understand it's very hard for anybody who's gone through it or is going through it. But we can not save our children from the complete impact, but we can definitely lower the impact.
Yes, well, totally agree with what you're saying. And I talk to my clients about those very things because they're so important. And especially because they do so much emotional and psychological damage to these innocent children. Can we talk about what happens to children when their parents use them as confidants? I know, especially with precocious children, it's very easy for those children to see their parents in pain and want to fix the problem. And it's easy for parents to start talking and sharing their woes and their stresses with the children. What happens to children when that takes place?
They actually feel responsible for the parents' happiness. And that's one, and they develop a lot of guilt if the parent is unhappy. And they feel that the guilt is that the parent is unhappy because of them. So they take on all of the problems that the parent is going through onto them, and they start feeling responsible for parents' actions. It has a very damaging effect. Not only that, it takes them into a spiral of anxiety. And they develop self-esteem issues because they start beginning to feel like they're responsible for everything that's happening in their parents' life. So because they're very privy to, when a child is used as a confidant, they're very privy to all of the issues that are going on. While they can't do anything, they want to save the parent. And then when they grow up, they instead of focusing on themselves, they grow up with this saving mentality. Mm-hmm. And they want to save the world. And they want to save people in need. And they sacrifice their own needs for saving somebody who is absolutely in need. So it has a very deep impact on them, and they forget, and due to which their self-esteem again goes down, because they're not caring for themselves. They're so used to listening to the parent and caring for the parent that becomes their personality.
Wow. Very impactful. You were describing my life, my childhood. My parents didn't divorce, but they should have. They stayed together for the sake of the kids, because in that generation, that's what happened. And my mother treated me as a confidant from age 8 right on through my teens. And it was a very, very disruptive childhood, very difficult to overcome all of that. And so I'm extremely aware and mindful about that, and talking to clients about that, because no good is going to come for that, for the children. And of course, my mother wasn't a bad person. She didn't understand what she was doing. She was in pain, and she reached out that way. So what are some of the other ways that we could have parents be better co-parents after the divorce? The divorce experience can be very traumatic for a lot of couples, and suddenly they're facing the fact that as parents, the divorce ends, but the challenges don't end, because now you're co-parenting your children for the rest of your life. And so what are some of the things that they need to be aware of?
I think this is a very challenging period for everybody, and some people get through it and some people find challenges. So here's what I tell everybody. Here are a few things that I would suggest. One, allow the child to make their own relationship with the other parent. Very important for you not to be the mediator, for them to fight their own battles. Because that makes the child stronger. That ensures that the other parent is equally present in their lives. So if it's a father, for instance, and they have anger issues, or they have issues, ego clashes, or anything like that with a parent, with a mother or a father, if there is an ego clash, let the child figure it out themselves. And to be more aware and mindful that the divorce happened for a reason. But and it doesn't happen in isolation. 2 people make a marriage and 2 people break a marriage. So there are certain aspects of you that are very strong, but there are also certain aspects of the other partner are very strong. So to be able to accept those aspects and to understand that you're bringing something to the table and the other person is bringing another thing to the table. So to be more accepting of each other's views. Avoid being in the same space if it doesn't. And this is one thing that I suggest. If you feel like you both are triggers for each other, communicate via text. Communicate with or get a co-parenting expert who helps you kind of manage the relationship. There are co-parenting experts out there who will help you after the divorce to manage the child. And being aware of your attitude. Being aware and more accepting of your own mistakes during the divorce, because we're all learning. And I feel like, and I always suggest to parents, you're creating a whole individual, a full individual who needs both parents in their lives, a mother and a father. And one may be more present and the other may be less present, but nonetheless, they need both. So be very accepting of the views. Go to therapy yourself. Identify your own triggers. Go through your own journey of why the divorce happened. And what is it that you could do in hindsight to be a different parent or a different wife or a different husband? Yeah. And when you take that self-journey yourself, I think you learn a lot of things about yourself, about your triggers, about where you went wrong. And just the very fact that you become so aware of your own journey, you will be more accepting of the other way. So very important to take that self-journey.
Thank you. That's such sound advice. We're going to take a short break right now, and we will be right back with Dr. Jain. Hello, everyone. We're back. This is Rosalind Sedacca, founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and you're listening to Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca on the Going Solo Network. We're talking to Dr. Jain, and we're talking about so many important facets of what happens to children as a result of their parents' divorce and how we can make life better for them by being more aware of situations and putting ourselves in our children's shoes and understanding it from their perspective. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jain, if you could talk about what happens when one parent is gone after the divorce. How does that impact the family dynamic?
It has a very deep impact on the child's psyche, and they can grow up with the fear of abandonment. So it's very important to understand what it can do to a child, but at the same time, while we cannot take away the impact, we can lower the impact by speaking to the child and positively about the other parent. Telling them that the other parent had to leave, and it was not because you did something wrong and they wanted to leave you. Because often what happens is when a parent leaves a child, they grow up with a fear of abandonment, and they feel responsible, and they feel like they were not good enough. And that's why the other parent dropped them and did not ever come back. So very important for the one present parent to show the other parent in a positive light, to save your child from the fear of abandonment. Which actually, if you look at it, it's very true. No parent, at least 90%, or at least parents who choose to be parents, would want to leave their child. So there has to be either the other parent is struggling with emotional issues, or they're carrying their own baggage, or there's something that's not right in their life, which is why they had to break their family or leave their child and go somewhere else. So developing that compassion for the other parent can help you raise a child who does not have abandonment issues. And maybe down the road, as the child grows up, they can rebuild the relationship at some point, but show the other parent in positive light.
So we leave the door open to that possibility.
Absolutely. And I will say this, my tagline for my website, if you go on to my website, you'll see my tagline is Bridging Generations. And one of my expertise is really to bridge the generational divide between a parent and a child. And I strongly believe that all the issues that we adults carry, they all stem from our childhood. Every form, whether that's fear, whether that's anger, that's expression, that's fear of abandonment, anything that we're struggling with, it all stems from our parents. So to make that foundation solid, it's very important to develop a whole individual. Because otherwise we're going to mirror those issues in our adult relationships.
Thank you.
For example, let's say a mother is not present. It's just when a child grows up, then they start looking at relationships and treating their other half as a parent. Which is not right for the relationship. So create that foundation. Remember, what you're doing is for your child. Try keeping your issues aside, and focus on giving this child a whole life.
Yes, well, that certainly is important advice. Why don't we take a moment right now to let people who are watching and listening know how they could find you and access your resources?
Absolutely. So let me just briefly, I know you mentioned, but I'm going to briefly just share who I am. My name is Dr. Unnatti Jain. I'm a youth behavior change specialist and a life coach. And I'm focused on helping individuals between ages 12 to 26 along with parents. And a lot of what I do is help people build resilience, confidence, self-esteem, get rid of their limiting belief systems through a three-pronged approach of discovery, clarity, and action. I'm also a motivational speaker. I'm also a TEDx speaker. I urge you to go and see my TEDx talk, which is how to move from control to connection. Very active on social media. I'm looking to, my website is www.genziandme.com. create-and-you.com. And Rosalind, I'll request you to kindly put that in the podcast. And you can connect with me on my socials and all across TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. My tag is Dr.Unnatti Jain. That's how you can reach me. That's it.
Wonderful. Well, that's good to know, because obviously you are covering a broad spectrum of working with children and then working with their parents to help the parents understand the dynamics of what's going on with their children. So in the time that we have left, why don't you give us some important suggestions and takeaways for parents to understand this complex world of divorce and co-parenting, and what are the foremost things that they should be keeping in mind?
The one and the foremost thing that you must keep in mind, whether you go through a divorce or you co-parent or you don't go through a divorce, but you have a child, is really your journey is the most important to parenthood. The more you explore your own triggers, the more you explore your own limiting beliefs, the more you explore your own fears, the stronger you'll make your kids, because a lot of things we do as parents are coming from our own belief systems, which we have established along the years, either in our childhood or growing up. And a lot of our triggers or a lot of our fears, we tend to put it on our children and limit their growth. So take that self-exploration journey as a parent and identify who you are, what you do. I have a book also, I'm an author of a parent-teen journey, where I share my journey along with how you can parent, how you can move from control. So please read it. Maybe it'll benefit you, but take that self-exploration journey, get to know yourself. The more you get to know yourself and the more you connect with yourself, the more solid your relationship will be with your child.
Well, that's wonderful for people to be aware of and understand, take to heart, because it makes such a difference. And those who are fortunate enough to understand that message early on in their parenting make a smoother experience for the children as they go through aging and into teen years and moving on into adulthood. So the earlier you can jump into that awareness, the better off your whole family will be.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you to just briefly touch on parental alienation, which is one of the saddest outcomes of divorce done wrong, and just give us some insight about why we need to avoid that equation?
Like I said earlier, parent alienation can be very damaging to a child's growth because there are fears that are associated with a parent leaving a child. Both parents are key to a child's growth. Very, very important. So when either one of the parents is alienated, it can have a very deep impact on their self-esteem, their confidence levels, their anxiety levels, and how they show up in the world.
And when it's one parent who is creating this alienation, what can we do to get that parent to understand the damage that they're doing, not only to the co-parent, but to the child?
So when one parent is alienating the other parent in the hope that you will be the favorite parent of the child, you're actually doing the opposite. Because the child is growing up and they're forming their own belief systems. And in any case, when a child sees a divorce happening, they mature a lot faster. So they're forming their own opinions. And it's very important for you to stay out of that negative space, because the more you negate the other person's viewpoint, the further you're going to push your child away, because then your child is going to start seeing you as toxic, because you're constantly criticizing the other parent. Because kids today are very aware of toxic relationships. And such kids, when a parent alienates the other parent, you're damaging the child's self-esteem. You're telling them that they're not good enough. You're telling them they were abandoned because you went through a divorce because of them. And you're making sure that when they grow up, they find codependent relationships. Because then the missing parent, they're going to be looking for that missing parent in their relationships as they grow up.
Hear you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop at this point, but you've been so helpful. This has been a wonderful conversation with you. I'm so grateful and thank you. And we've been talking to Dr. Jain about divorce and co-parenting issues. This is Rosalind Sedacca on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And I hope you'll join us next time for more divorce, dating, and empowered living with Rosalind Sedacca. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.